Do you use Wikipedia as a source of research? Do you trust it as an unbiased, objective representation of the truth? Well, unfortunately, it's been taken over by far-left mentalists like every Western institution, and the bias is now insane. Wikipedia says that Trump is categorically a fascist. I mean, I like Trump, but he's not that good. They say that Israel commits genocide, but China doesn't. There were no mass killings under communism, and anything they don't like is a conspiracy theory and excised from the records, like Stalin removing someone from a photo. So Bill Clinton's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein is expunged from history. Far-left journalist Owen Jones was caught out editing Wikipedia entries on Hamas to remove a reference to suicide bombings being a war crime and to point out that Hamas were popular for their charity. Oh yeah, remember their sponsored Beheadathon? I mean, Hamas are basically Lenny Henry with balaclavas. I mean, I guess Owen Jones isn't wrong technically. They are popular with a certain segment of the population, and a lot of charity money does end up going to Hamas. The latest example of Wikipedia's far-left revisionism is the rewriting of the Wikipedia page on Muslim grooming gangs in the United Kingdom to grooming gang moral panic in the United Kingdom. Relax guys, it's just a moral panic. Oh, what a relief. All those thousands of victims and convictions of the worst criminals in British history are just a concocted hysteria, like reefer madness or satanic messages in rock music in the 80s. Nothing to see here. Ignore the cries of thousands of victims and the cold hard evidence presented in hundreds of court cases. Wikipedia is maintained by volunteers who are 90% male and 100% annoying do-gooders, like this guy, Stephen Pruitt. He has the largest number of edits made to the English Wikipedia, over 6 million edits, and he wants to uplift marginalised voices. By marginalised voices, he means the only voices we ever seem to hear from that are rammed down our throats day in, day out. Stephen has stated that he aims to fight gender bias on Wikipedia, and many other Wikipedia editors have tried to redress this gender imbalance by chucking on a bad wig and calling themselves a woman. The editor who made the changes to the grooming gangs article is apparently this person, trans activist and liberal democrat Sarah Noble. Imagine my surprise that someone who looks like this wants to minimise grooming gangs. These editors are unpaid by Wikipedia, but there's plenty of shady money from people like George Soros sloshing around, pulling strings behind the scenes, and there's a whole United Nations project dedicated to monitoring and amending pages on Wikipedia. The founder of Wikipedia has claimed that the CIA are editing pages, probably just the entry on who shot JFK.
The CIA and the FBI computers were used to edit Wikipedia. You think they stopped doing that back then? No. And not just them.
And according to Wikipedia, black pride and Asian pride are positive movements, and gay pride is a wholesome opportunity to get your bum out, but white pride is neo-Nazi racism. I wonder what it is that Wikipedia editors think is so different about people who have white skin. Because all the admins are woke and edit the Wikipedia files, I'll refer to them from now on as Wikipedia files. I'm going to look at why this bias happens and why it matters and why even the inventor of Wikipedia says we shouldn't trust it. What else are they lying about? Why is it happening? What's the big money behind it all? And what does it say about bias in the wider media? First, my sponsor from this video, Ground News. If you've been watching my videos, you'll know that media outlets are becoming more and more biased. I spend half my time researching and digging around to see the full picture. Sometimes I get caught out, like when all the media were shouting, Trump says there's going to be a bloodbath if he's not elected. I mean, yeah, he said those words, but he was talking about the car industry. That's why I've been using Ground News to help me research. At a glance, their app and website shows how much coverage a story has had and if one side is burying it. You can follow along at ground.news/Leo. They allow you to compare articles on a story from around the world and get different perspectives, and it lets you know what's behind those perspectives, so you don't just get more in-depth coverage of the story, you know how big a pinch of salt to take with each article. So I was delighted when they got in touch and said, Leo, do you want some money? And bias in the media isn't going away. If anything, it's getting worse. Take a look at this story. ADL report details alleged anti-Israel bias by Wikipedia editors. At a glance, we can see there's over 30 articles reporting on this story, with only 11% of them being left-leaning, making this a potential blind spot for people on the left. Comparing coverage is easy. The ADL says Wikipedia contains anti-Semitic bias amid dispute over how the Israel-Hamas conflict is represented on the site, says the left, while the right emphasises a coordinated campaign against Israel by Wikipedia editors. You can see how the different sides treat the same story differently. I chose Ground News to sponsor because I actually use it. It does the hard work for me. You can drill down deeper into bias and ownership if you want to, but I'm usually an a hurry, we need to start thinking about the information we consume in the same way we think about the meat we consume, and ground news is the equivalent of an over-educated waiter telling you the exact diet, family tree and maiden name of the cow you're eating. And I find it's better at collating stories you're interested in than Google News is. For me, sometimes the bias is the story. Go to ground.news/Leo or scan the QR code for an objective, data-driven way to read the news. And you can save 40% on the Ground News Unlimited Access Vantage plan with my link. It's not expensive, so you're not taking much of a gamble, and if you sign up, I get money so I can become rich and powerful and crush my enemies. Anyway, now let's look at the bias on Wikipedia. I'll get to Trump, Israel and anti-white racism in a moment, but first, grooming gangs. The Wikipedia page on Muslim grooming gangs in the United Kingdom, as I said, was renamed to Grooming Gang Moral Panic in the United Kingdom. Moral panic is a loaded phrase suggesting the whole grooming gang scandal is just a myth concocted by bigots. But the grooming gangs are real. If you're unaware, maybe you weren't on Twitter in January 2025, they were gangs of predominantly Pakistani Muslim men targeting thousands of white and Sikh working class girls for gang rape, torture and sometimes death. Even calling them grooming gangs is a classic British euphemism, as if they're just little Chinese guys going around shampooing poodles or doing pedicures. And it definitely happened. There have been hundreds of investigations, prosecutions and victim testimonies. If you want to hear about the worst crimes in humanity, there are plenty of inquiries and books to dig out. The progressive left want grooming gangs to be a myth and a moral panic because grooming gangs destroy the left's religious belief that multiculturalism is a strength. We're not just getting some spicy food and cheap taxi drivers. These people don't leave their horrific medieval misogynistic violent tribal cultures behind when they step off the boat onto British land. The Wikipedia editor behind the change has been exposed as former Liberal Democrat activist Sarah Noble, who identifies as a transgender woman. Some people have said Sarah is a man, but let me reassure you, she is just as much of a woman as someone like me. Sarah has tweeted, "Kill all men, fuck men and die cisgendered scum," which I think we can all agree is classic lady behaviour. Sarah describes Z-self as a non-binary dyke with Z, they, she pronouns and says that Z's editing tends to fall into one of two areas, including transgender issues and helping to reduce the amount of cisgender, heterosexual and male systemic bias on the encyclopedia. Yeah, alright mate, it's not 2020 anymore. However much Sarah might look like a trustworthy lady, the edited article on grooming gangs is willfully misleading. It conflates the issue of grooming gangs with the wider issue of child sexual exploitation to try and dilute it, and it doesn't take into account proportionality. Of course you'd expect historic cases of child sexual exploitation to mainly be white men, as Britain has historically been mainly quite white, although that's now changing. But if a tiny proportion of the population, a subset of Pakistani Muslims, predominantly from the Mirpur region, is still committing an outsized number of particularly barbaric crimes, then it shouldn't be swept under the magic carpet. I mean, just look at the names and the mugshots of the perpetrators of these crimes. Although obviously I'm making an assumption about the background of the perpetrators, it's entirely possible that a native British person could have named their child Muhammad Jal Abdul Ali Jihadi Death to the West Toyota Hilux. Wikipedia minimising and obfuscating these crimes is doing exactly what the state did. Social workers who raised them as an issue were sent on diversity training or demoted, journalists were smeared as racist, anyone who raised concerns about it was dismissed as a bigot. Ideology seems to trump facts on Wikipedia. When a medical study looked at medical conditions described in Wikipedia pages and compared it to actual peer-reviewed published research, Wikipedia contradicted medical research 90% of the time. There's also an issue on Wikipedia with people editing their own pages. Take the notorious case of Johann Hari. He was an up-and-coming journalist. He was caught red-handed editing his own Wikipedia page to paint himself as one of the essential writers of our times. He also used the platform to smear his rivals. It derailed his career, but countless other self-promoters slipped by unnoticed thanks to Wikipedia's baked-in anonymity. And this is Priyamvada Gopal, who looks like she's about to rip Indiana Jones's heart out of his body in the Temple of Doom, but is in fact much worse than that. She's Professor of Post-Colonial Studies at Cambridge University. She's not achieved much as an academic except to make crass racist statements such as "white lives don't matter as white lives" and "abolish whiteness." Charming. I mean, if you're going to be an anti-white racist, at least come up with something original. She also claimed that Tory politician Priti Patel is a reminder that many Asians in British Africa had ferociously anti-black attitudes and were used by colonial administrations to keep black populations in place. And Priyamvada compared black politician Lord Sewell to Nazi propagandist Joseph Goebbels because Sewell had the temerity to suggest that Britain isn't racist, and she was accused of tweeting conspiratorial editorial attacks on Jewish student journalists. Her comments generated some controversy among the small number of British people who still think that the genocide of white people is a bad idea, and she had Home Office lectures cancelled, which meant they had to get a different frothing-mouthed anti-white racist in. But you wouldn't know any of this from her Wikipedia page, which has had any mention of these controversies removed by a Wikipedophile who seems unusually obsessed with making sure Wikipedia only says nice things about Priyamvada Gopal and hides all the bad stuff. I wonder who that could be. Wikipedia also categorically ranked Donald Trump as a fascist. I don't think Wikipedia editors know what fascism is. It's not just a word you can shout at anyone you don't like. As one of history's top fascists, Benito Mussolini, said, everything in the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. Fascism is the state control of everything. The economy, the judiciary, the society. Trump is cutting the size and the power of the state, so he's technically an anti-fascist. The people who want to put up taxes and give the state more power, i.e. everyone on the left, are the fascists. And it's not just Trump that Wikipedia is biased against. There's a huge bias against right-wing politicians, as you can see here with the measure of sentiment in Wikipedia articles about presidents. All the recent Republican presidents have negative sentiment, even though they're basically just a bunch of cool guys who like to party. And Wikipedia editors love the hair-sniffing, pedo island-attending Democrat presidents, because Wikipedia editors also probably like doing those things. In fact, any organisation that isn't explicitly left-wing can be accused of being far-right, like the Free Speech Union, which is a non-partisan membership organisation that has represented feminists, pro-Palestinian protesters, environmental activists and former Labour MPs, and have a former Labour advisor on their board. But if they don't like right-wing politicians, Wikipediaphiles love communists. The page outlining the deaths of millions in communist states, including the Soviet Union and China, has been flagged for deletion because some Wikipediaphiles don't like mass murder being blamed on communist ideology. The dedicated entry listing the actions of figures like Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot and Kim Jong-il has been accused of putting forward a biased anti-communist point of view, and site administrators will decide whether or not it should be removed. One page that definitely won't be deleted though is anti-communist mass killings, where they detail all the horrible, terrible persecution of communists. It might seem mean to kill communists, but they'd only kill each other or starve themselves to death anyway. And Wikipedia is quick to label anything that goes against the communist ideology of the disgusting fat nonces who run it as a conspiracy theory. So gender ideology isn't listed as a category, but as a conspiracy theory and part of the anti-gender movement. Who'd have thought Wikipedia editors would take a critique of gender ideology personally? And cultural Marxism is listed as a conspiracy theory too, instead of their underpinning philosophy. Also, Wikipedia isn't always independent. The United Nations launched a project to monitor and amend Wikipedia articles relating to climate change to ensure that they only show UN-approved opinions and information. This is global government propaganda, and as you'd expect for a bunch of leftists, there's an anti-Israel bias too. An investigation by the Jewish World Council, who I totally trust to be impartial when it comes to Israel, discovered 40 Wikipedia editors described as pro-Hamas who have engaged in a seemingly coordinated campaign, making 850,000 edits to Israel-related articles to demonize Israel as a colonial apartheid genocidal regime, which they say is a bad thing, as well as portray radical Islamist groups in a positive light. And Jewish pressure group, the ADL, is listed as an unreliable source, which it is, but we all know why they're saying it. I wonder if the ADL is waking up yet to the fact that the real threat to Jews and Israel doesn't come from the right. There are Israel flags at Tommy Robinson rallies. It's the left that are the threat now. And Wikipedia editors refer to a genocide in Gaza as if it's an accepted truth when no serious mainstream news outlet does that. If Israel wanted to commit genocide against Palestinians, they could easily. Instead, the population of Gaza has increased hugely. Meanwhile, an actual genocide of Uyghur Muslims in China is written up as a persecution, even though they're killed, forced to work as slaves, sent to re-education camps and mass sterilised to remove them from the Chinese population. Although, in fairness to China, when's the last time there was an Islamist terror attack in China? Maybe there is wisdom in these ancient Far Eastern cultural practices. Even the man who invented Wikipedia says that nobody should trust it.
If only one version of the facts is allowed, then that gives a huge incentive to wealthy and powerful people to seize control of things like Wikipedia in order to shore up their power. And they do that.
And he gave the example of Joe Biden's page not including information from the Republican perspective, such as concerns over his cognitive decline or Hunter Biden's laptop or Ukraine corruption. Why is this happening? Well, there's big money pushing agendas. George Soros' foundation has donated millions to Wikipedia, and before some cloth-eared lefty says, well, that's just money, it doesn't mean he's got any influence, his organisation, the Open Society Foundations, has had senior staffer Melissa Hageman appointed to the Wikimedia Foundation Advisory Board. But the money is just one thing. Wikipedia suffers from the same problem as Reddit. The only people willing to act as unpaid editors are people with nothing better to do who want to feel some sort of control over other people. The problem with right-wing people is that they're too busy being attractive and successful and making lots of money and banging hot babes on yachts to get involved with low-reward activities like Wikipedia editing or politics. So all of our institutions have been taken over by unemployable communist nonces, and now Western civilization is going to be destroyed and we're all going to die in a gulag because of it. And journalism used to be a well-paid career, but now the arse has fallen out of it. Thanks to the internet making infinite news free, social media giving people other things to look at, and the proliferation of channels, meaning advertising is spread ever more thinly across them, newspapers no longer have the resources to fund thorough, balanced investigative reporting. According to the Financial Times, a reader needs to spend roughly 6 hours on the Daily Mail website to generate £1 of revenue through adverts. This pushes news outlets to be cheap and clickbaity to try and get readers' eyeballs on the articles. The idea of investing huge amounts of money in investigative journalism to find something out that you might then get sued for and lose even more money on isn't appealing to papers anymore, when they could just run some bait bollocks about vegan children or a pop quiz to find out which sweater you are. Journalists don't even have time to check their sources anymore. They just go to Wikipedia. Not that journalists are even interested in objective truth anymore. The lack of money means that a lot of journalists aren't in it as a career. They're in it to change the world for the better. As anyone who lived through Mao's famines will tell you, there's nothing worse than someone trying to change the world for the better. This new activist class of journalists already has their ideology and their utopian ideal for what the world should look like, and they'll bend their journalism to fit that ideology. A friend is on a journalism course and she says they're all completely captured by left-wing propaganda. They all have the worldview that right-wing people are all fascists. Anyone who mentions grooming gangs is a racist, and socialism is good. They're all activists and they don't even know it. And this is going to have a big impact. You know the misinformation laws that the government is pushing through, the Online Safety Act and the regulations around what can and can't be said on social media? These are the people who are going to be creating and administering these rules, and this is the justification for those rules. Purple-haired basement-dwelling nonce-lords will be deciding if you've broken speech laws. Your life will be in the hands of the transvestite from Silence of the Lambs who'll decide whether you go in the well or not. These laws are already being used to shut down social media platforms like Gab and BitChute, and you know Twitter will be next and then YouTube. And lies on Wikipedia can create a self-reinforcing loop as they're picked up and repeated by reputable newspapers, which are then cited by Wikipedia editors as proof the original misinformation was accurate. The bullshit becomes reality, and since there's a huge left-wing bias, this means there's a ton of left-wing bullshit being cemented into our collective history. In George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984, the protagonist Winston Smith works in the records department of the Ministry of Truth, where his job is to rewrite historical documents so they match the constantly changing current party line. This involves revising newspaper articles and doctoring photographs, but at least Winston Smith was getting paid. The Wokipedophiles are doing it for free. And yes, I did copy and paste that segment on 1984 straight from the Wikipedia page on it. Anyway, go to ground.news/Leo or scan the QR code for an objective, data-driven way to read the news, and you can save 40% on the Ground News Unlimited Access Vantage plan with my link. It's not expensive, so you're not taking much of a gamble, and if you sign up, I get money. Anyway, thanks for listening, and if you want to support me making these videos and join a growing community of the only sane people left in the West and get access to all my content and live streams and stuff, then you can sign up to my Patreon or chuck me money for a beer before alcohol is banned in Britain. There are links below. Okay, thanks for listening. I've been Leo Kears. Bye. Bye bye.